I'm Julie Fernandez and welcome to this Peterborough Presents podcast where we're talking everyday creatives. Everyone listening has a creative spark inside of themselves somewhere. It can manifest in different ways, from professional performances all the way through to subtle, spontaneous, delicious home-cooked meals. No matter who you are, your unique form of creativity is there, even if it's yet to be discovered. In each episode, I'll be chatting with a variety of local creatives ranging from poets, crafters, dancers, singers, writers and more to explore what creativity means to them and how it impacts their lives. Whether you're an accomplished artist or feel as imaginative as a wooden spoon, this podcast is for you. So listen in, creativity may surprise you. Hi guys, welcome to the podcast. This is very exciting to have you both here.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I can't wait for this. I'm really excited.
Brilliant. We're going to talk all about creativity today, but I'd like to start off by asking you three things. Your name, what you're creative in, and what you're not creative in. Go.
Okay, well, my name is Faith. I would primarily say I'm creative in words, so I'm a poet, spoken words. I also do photos. I'd say that I'm pretty creative across the board, but one thing I haven't really tried is dancing, and I'd say I have rhythm, but skill and technique is what I lack. So maybe one day I could take a class, but yeah, that's what I'd say.
Okay, that's cool.
My name is Sumaiya, and I would say I'm creative kind of similarly, like with words. I'm quite a good communication person. Like, I love to talk and love to like tell people stories, but also bring the stories out to them, encouragement.
Okay.
And how I'm not creative, I would say I could never do rap. I can never, but also I feel as well I'm not a great dancer or anything. I feel I have a bit of rhythm as well, but never really established anything. But like, I would definitely look into that, and especially music more.
Okay, I think maybe we should all take a dance class together.
Definitely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as long as all you need to do is throw your arms around, I'm good. As soon as we have the foot shuffle, I'm out. But let's talk a bit about creativity. Faith, I really want to hear how you got into it, because from what I understand, you were the first ever Youth Poet Laureate in Peterborough.
Yeah, I was, yeah.
Tell me about that and how you got along that journey and how you got there.
Yeah, so I basically had always really loved words. Like, I was a major bookworm as a child, still am, and I used to love to write as well growing up. And then when I kind of got to like secondary school age, I started just writing, I guess, more as a hobby. It was like a nice outlet for me. And yeah, I just kind of really enjoyed doing poetry. I enjoyed like reading it and writing it. And so then when I got to sixth form, one of my teachers actually like sent around the advertisement for the competition, which was a competition for the Youth Laureate for Peterborough. And it was the first time that they'd ever had a Youth Laureate. Like, they'd obviously been having the adult version, but this was the first time they had a youth version. And I kind of thought, like, I don't know, I'll give it a go. Like,
I can do this.
Yeah, you know, I like writing. Like, if anything, it will just be like a fun thing to do.
Okay.
And I think as well, a lot of my poetry is like, it works best when I have a brief, like when I have something to work towards.
Okay.
So I kind of thought, you know, okay, I'll do that. And the competition was basically, you had to write a poem and then obviously submit it. And then I was like so surprised, because then I got shortlisted. And it was such a great night, because all the shortlisted like participants came in and then had a night where we all performed.
Okay.
And that was pretty much the first time that I feel like I'd performed my own poetry.
How old was you?
I would have been 17, 18
Okay.
if I was in sixth form. And yeah, I was completely shaken. Like, I was so nervous, but it was a great night. Like, I got to actually hear other people performing as well. And I just remember that being such a night of inspiration for me, because I guess that was the first time I kind of thought about how spoken word works in like conversation with just poetry, and the kind of sense of words really do come alive when you suddenly put a performance aspect to it. And yeah, like I was already kind of like on top of the world with that. And then at the end of the night, obviously got the announcement that I'd won, which was like, what? Incredible. And I guess that kind of like really, one, I feel like it really helped my confidence in the sense of like people actually liked what I wrote, and I never thought that could be a thing. And then also just kind of like really opened my eyes into kind of the creative spaces in Peterborough itself. And I got to like meet so many cool people. And yeah, I think from there, it's really just been more of a hobby that I've taken a bit more seriously, and more of a thing that I say is a part of my like identity and day to day. And so it's really cool. And I feel like getting that at that age really helped shape the way I think about creativity now. So yeah.
Tell me a bit about those creative spaces you mentioned in Peterborough.
Yeah, so I actually was born in London, and so I lived in London for like the first half of my life. So until I was around like 12, and then we moved to Peterborough after that. And so, as you can imagine, London and Peterborough are pretty different cities.
That's
Yep.
So I kind of went from the kind of, I guess, hustle, bustle, loud buzz of London to Peterborough, which is a lot more, it's got a hustle and bustle of its own, but it's a lot more subtle, as in it's not as much in your face as London is. And so I kind of like grew up with the kind of sense of like, you know, Peterborough's not really got as much as London's got going on. Like, you know, where are the people? Where are the things happening? And I guess like when you're in school as well, it's kind of difficult to access those places sometimes because they're not completely like apparent to you in your face.
Yeah.
So I kind of felt like a bit discouraged by that, and I think that was the turning point for me winning the competition, because then that was when I kind of realised, no, wait, wow, there are some really cool people in this city, and like there's some really cool people who care about being creative and who care about wanting to kind of put that into Peterborough's kind of like wider culture. So yeah, I think it was things like meeting the then laureate, who was Malika Speaks, Charlie, who was obviously laureate like before, and just kind of realising that, you know, it's the people that make the spaces for me. And I think that was something that I have taken on board so much, and I think it's helped me kind of think of like, well, how can I be a kind of space of creativity and culture as well in Peterborough. So I think it was more that kind of switch of perception for me that really helped.
And it's fun, isn't it, meeting other like-minded people from all different walks of life. You may in other circumstances not think that you would connect, but when you have poetry as something that unites you, that's quite amazing, isn't it?
No, definitely. And I think one of the best things I will never forget is there was a performer who came on and did this like almost, it's funny you mentioned rap before, because it was almost like a rap, like how quick and punchy and like full of life it was. And I think that was for me, I was like, wow, like I've never heard anything like this ever before. So I think it's just great because we all speak in kind of that language of poetry, but even then people have got their own different spins on it. And I think that's what makes it just so amazing, is that being able to learn from other people and kind of like just appreciate for them for their talent and what they bring to the table.
Amazing.
I felt like she did a little rap just there. Did you see it?
Yeah, absolutely.
She was in her flow.
Right. So tell me a bit about yourself, who you are, what your creativity is and what your creativity isn't.
So, like I said, I don't really think I could put definite title towards my creativity. I feel like I kind of just flow with what's going on. Even how I got to my creativity, it was definitely unexpected. I mean, in school, I did everything but anything creative.
Okay.
And then when I got into college, I even, did sciences, which was definitely not really creative. And then I just took a redirection. I got to a point where I was like, I feel like I'm not expressing myself. And for me, I feel creativity is a way to reveal yourself. It's an expression of who you are inside, and it's to be known, I feel.
So what brought you to the point where you thought, I'm not being creative?
Yeah.
Because that's quite a big statement to make.
Yeah, I think I got to a point where it's just like I felt there was no passion left in life. I felt like everything was kind of mundane, and it was just like getting tasks done or just getting stuff done. And I feel for me, what changed was that I knew I had imagination in me, and I just wanted to really amplify that and give it that space that it needed, because in me it was like booming, it was like a volcano.
Okay, so life was a bit vanilla and you wanted to make it extra.
Yeah.
I get you. So how did you do that?
So I then 360'd my course and then went to do journalism and media.
Okay.
Because that was the only like available kind of like course at the time when I was doing it. But then that really like led me into exploring my words, exploring my, you know, expressions, etc. Because one thing I know from all my childhood is I've always been a talker. Like my mum and dad, they always used to say, because I also used to have a stutter when I was little, so I used to struggle a lot to talk. Then when I got my confidence to talk, I would never shut up about it. Like I would just talk. And my mum always used to say, like, that is your strength and the way that you can communicate with people. So then I thought, okay, let me just totally drop science and go straight into, you know, journalism and, you know, media.
Talk to me about your journalism and media. What have you done, and what kind are there topics that you concentrate on?
Yeah, in my like course, I definitely focused, because at the time I definitely saw like a lot of ethnic minority voices were kind of suppressed, and I felt, especially within Peterborough, because like you said, London now, like I'm in London, I feel so different. But like just being in Peterborough, being brought up in Peterborough, I felt there was never enough voices of ethnic minorities being voiced out, or ones I did not know about. And like these creative spaces you mentioned, I only found out through being on the journalism and media course. So it's more exposed towards me then.
Oh, right.
And that was literally because I felt it kind of equipped me with the communication skills to outreach for that. Because I guess if you don't ask, you don't get. But that's why I want to like encourage that to come more forward to people who don't have like the confidence to ask, or don't have the space to ask that. But yeah, that kind of kick-started, and definitely I did a lot of projects within like I said, ethnic minorities, etc. And then a lot of storytelling and interviews, and I moved in more into like wanted to make a documentary.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
So that was for my final project, and I was looking into making documentaries on the lives of like the Pakistani community within Peterborough, because a lot of people don't know that the Pakistani community, like within the UK at large, is only like 2% of the community within Pakistan. They only represent a 2% majority of what's actually in that country. So in the UK we only see a certain type of person, and I felt like I wanted to see, okay, this is what Peterborough is showing, but then how can we bring out the other sides to educate people on the diversity of what Pakistan is.
What are those other sides?
So like for example, majority of the UK's Pakistani population is from Mirpur, which is Kashmir area, and that has one certain culture. Or there's Punjabi people, and that's like the dominant culture, and that's such a vibrant, beautiful side. But there's so many different subcultures and subgroups within the country that I feel even us as Pakistanis or other people would never know about. Like I didn't know about the northern people, the like more south, and you know, all these different people. And it's definitely it actually is like embedded in everything we do, but we don't realize it. And to explain that, it's kind of like the clothing we wear. We think it's just from like our region or a certain region, but it's actually not. It's like they're kind of like, you know, like when you think of the Silk Road, it's kind of like a passive, like it's passed through different people, different thingies to get to where you are now. So you just think it's one part, but there's a story, and there's like it passed through so many different, you know, creative artisans, etc. to get to where you are now, and for you to express it in the way you are.
And there's creativity in clothing as well, isn't there? Colour and style, and the folding of it done in a certain way is quite interesting.
Yeah, and I think that definitely encouraged me a lot, because even during my time at the college, I became so much more expressive in my fashion, like you mentioned.
Okay.
I remember my lecturer, he's like, every time I see you, I feel like I don't know who you are, because you just come with a totally different, like, you know, outer appearance. Like, you've just switched it up. From one minute you're wearing, like, normal day, everyday clothes, or jeans on the top, and the next day you're, like, flamboyant, and you're wearing, like, you know, like, mirrors and stuff on your clothes and stuff like that. I'm like, yeah, because we have to be the the expressiveness of what we want to show.
So have you found that creativity has given you a bit of confidence?
Yes, definitely. I felt like I said, I feel creativity is to be known and to be revealed. So I felt, for me, when I started to kind of like look inside a bit more, I'm like, who is Sumaiya? Like, what is she like? What makes her, like, you know, feel that fire in her, and it was like this stuff was attracting me and this stuff was attracting me. Like I always loved colours. I've always been quite a loud and vibrant person when I was little, but then I kind of like lost that to, I feel, a simulation in a way, like through the normal school systems, etc. It's kind of like just the way society goes. And I felt when I looked into creativity, when I realised, to me it was like a revealing. It was like opening yourself up. And that definitely helped me gain confidence, because I was like, well, confidence comes within. And when you open yourself up, then it's just going to come out. And it's not like you have to take a class to get there, which I feel like is targeted towards us as young people, like, oh, take this master class in how to get confidence.
Did you find the same, Faith? Did you find that the more you delved into creativity, the more confident? Because, to stand up on a stage and perform your poetry does take a bit of confidence.
Yeah, it does. And I think the way it works for me is that whenever I stand up and perform, it's kind of like, I always say like, it's not me, it's someone else. But obviously it is me. I feel like it is just a different version of me that can't come out on day to day. And when you have the space to be able to perform your own words, it's kind of that super concentrated part of yourself that you want to. I really love how you're saying like it reveals you. I feel like it really does, because it's just another side of you that perhaps doesn't always have the space or like attention or I guess to be able to exist just normally. We're so busy in our lives and there's so many things we've got to think about, our relationships with others, the way we're going to live in this world and like in our city. And I feel as though those things kind of can sometimes push creativity to the side. So I feel as though in those moments when I am performing, it is that part of myself that I can give full attention to and I can let other people also see. So I think, there is definitely a part of it that comes with confidence. But I think at the same time, it really is just about showing how you would be if you didn't have to commit to so many other things.
Have you found that culture has played a big part in your creativity?
Yeah, I'd say so. I feel as though, so my heritage is like Nigerian.
Okay.
Although I've never actually been to Nigeria. I've been in the UK my whole life. But I feel as though I draw on those kind of roots in the sense of like in my family and also like when I think about my like grandmother as well. And I think it is just those things that shape how you are and how you live. Being raised by those people obviously will inform how you then now think about the world. And I think it's just all those kinds of things wrapped up into one, whether that's like, we were talking about clothes before, whether that's like food, whether that's just the way you kind of talk to each other, communicate with each other, the banter we have, like in our household and the importance that family plays. I think that in our culture, family and respect is so vital. So I think those things definitely do play into how I think about creativity, and it also plays into how I want my creativity to also celebrate, because I think that it really is a gift to be able to have all these things, to have words, to have family, to have heritage. And so all these things kind of do play in together. And so I definitely think it has a massive impact. I tie in like obviously my Nigerian roots with my kind of like, I guess, heritage of living in the UK and heritage of living in Peterborough as well. So it all comes together.
So Nigerian poetry, is it quite different? Have you ever tapped into that and that scene and brought that into it?
Yeah, so Nigerian people, especially the kind of heritage I have is I'm from a Yoruba tribe. So the Yoruba tribe were known to be very boisterous, very like outspoken, loud, proud people. And I think I have tapped into a little bit of like poetry as well while I was at uni. So I studied English at uni, and I love to read and like look at like West African literature, and a lot of West African literature is based on kind of that sense of heritage and tradition, and the sense of harkening back to ancestry, the sense of like things being handed down from generation to generation. And I think there's a lot of spirituality in that literature.
Okay.
And I think a lot of that does tie in to the work I like do as well, because it's all about kind of the way I think about words is they're kind of almost cementing what you know into something you can look at and something you can come back to again and again. That's why I love books so much, because you can come back to them again and again and again. And so when I write, it's about what do I want to be the legacy that I kind of like hold on to and kind of eventually will pass on to my next generation. Yeah.
Tell me who your favourite authors and poets are.
Wow, this is a massive question.
Top three.
Okay.
Who would you suggest people go and read first?
Okay. Right, so at uni I wrote my dissertation. My final dissertation was on Black British poetry.
Okay.
And my favourite ever poet is Caleb Femi. He was London's laureate a few years ago.
Okay.
And I wrote my dissertation very largely based on his debut collection, which is called Poor. And it's about kind of life and experiences growing up and living on the North Peckham estate in London. So he's one of my favourite poets, just purely because I feel like, you know, he kind of tells his experience, but it's also, whenever, I feel as though my dissertation was touching a lot on these points of whenever someone of colour or someone from an ethnic minority speaks out and kind of, whether that's poetry, whether that's music, whether that's anything, a lot of it is tied back to their identity, and a lot of it is tied back to they must be talking about their own personal experience, but also it has to be tied back into their community. And I was talking a lot about the pressures and kind of constraints of one singular person being kind of becoming the spokesperson for their entire community, and that kind of not always being the right way in which we should approach these things, because obviously if you're an individual as much as you have a community that you belong to. And I kind of spoke about the way that his poetry kind of sits in conversation with a larger sort of canon of work of lyric poetry traditions, which we have in like English literature. So I just love his work so much. I think his stuff is super amazing and so touching. So I think first and foremost him. My second person, he also does write poetry, but he's more known for his novels. That's Chinua Achebe. His most famous novel, Things Fall Apart. And it's based in a kind of pre-colonial Nigeria, and he kind of talks about the pressures and like the ways in which colonialism, when it first started coming in, was something that really transformed the way that villages and relationships were happening in those times. And I think that a lot of what he was writing about, although it's like pre-modern times, it also touches so heavily on what we're seeing today and the legacy of that. And I remember when I read that, like that was such a, again, these are just like eye-opening pivotal moments for me. When I read these things, I'm like, wow, like I never thought about things in this way. And I think it's really important that you also you have a sense of relating to what's being spoken about, even though there are things you didn't even know about before. So Chinua Achebe, I'd say as well. And then this is really hard.
We can stick at two if you want to stick to two, no problem.
There is one more person who
Okay.
I really love, but this is by no means my top three. Of course, like there are so many other people. But,
Absolutely.
there's this Trinidadian Canadian poet. Her name is called M. Norbeshe Phillip. And she's another poet. There's a trend here. But she does amazing work with language and about kind of breaking the constraints of language, specifically thinking about the English language as one that was a colonizing language, you know, across the globe, particularly in the global south. And so what she does is she kind of uses the English language to sort of draw attention to the pressures of how does one communicate themselves in a language or a tongue that was never meant to accommodate that identity.
That's so interesting.
It's incredible stuff that she does. I did a lot of work on her. Her most famous work is probably one called Zong, which is based on a slave ship, which was also called Zong, which went obviously during the slave trade. And what happened was during the Zong massacre, is what they call it, the traders on the boat actually threw overboard the bodies of these enslaved people because they could then claim insurance from that as cargo, which is obviously horrific. But what she does is she kind of uses her words to kind of tell a story that can't be told is what she calls it, in the sense of how do you give words to something so horrific, and how can you do that in a language which has been the vessel and the vehicle for so many things that are so horrific as well. And yeah, it's an incredible collection, because the words are sort of floating on the page. They're all fractured. All the letters are kind of like almost swimming, and it's meant to kind of represent the voiceless and the people who no longer have a voice, because, you know, they've been the subject of such like violence. And yeah, it's quite a heavy topic, but I think what interests me the most is just the way in which she kind of wrenches language apart and kind of rethinks the way in which we use language and the way in which we understand it to work together. So yeah, those are my top 3. I would definitely recommend.
Good 3.
Yeah, but by no means the only. But
I know it's really hard when people are like, "What's
My
your
mind
top
is
3
just
films?"
like going off with like fireworks. Like, oh my god, like I want to ask her this. I want to know this.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Do
because
it.
I studied a class, like colonial class in my uni as well, and they kind of like mention of English being like the vehicle language.
Right, absolutely.
And also that because English as well is also the language of international communication as well. And why is that, and how could we change that in the near future, or is it never going to be possible? Because like it came from colonialism, and the fact that now it's the international communication system for everyone whenever you travel to a different country.
Though apparently Spanish is the most spoken language in the world.
Wow, really?
Yeah. I thought it was English.
You
It's not,
can't
it's Spanish.
forget also that it's not only English. Obviously, we think of English, and I suppose that comes to our legacy as well of being in the UK and being based here. But it's also, there are very much other colonizing languages, you know, Portuguese, French, Dutch, like it's all sorts of things like that. And I think it's those kind of, I think it kind of shapes where we think about where the center of kind of, I guess, culture, of the arts, and where we want to put that emphasis. And I think it's difficult, especially if you're a person like for me, even though I have like Nigerian heritage and I have those roots, and this is something that Norbert Philip also touches on, her being kind of her heralding her heritage from the Caribbean, but English is her native tongue, and that's the tongue that she has to kind of use because that's the only thing she knows. So it's the kind of weird conflict that you have, in the sense of, this is the language or the framework in which you think through, but how other could you actually have done that, because this is something that was also imposed, and violently imposed in a very vast majority of cases.
Yeah, because I think of that all the time, because for example, my own language, I'm not fluent in it, but I can definitely resonate with certain words, like certain words in the language, and I'm just like, I feel.
When you say your own language, okay, yeah.
But like it's a mixed Punjabi, Urdu.
Okay.
Like for example, there's certain words which I feel I can't even translate to my friends what that means or how that feels. And when I try to express myself, I'm like, oh, I'm feeling this right now, and I'll say the word in my language, and I just can't say to my friend, but this is how it feels, like peace or calmness, because there's certain things that English can't really translate. And I feel like that's where, as ethnic minorities, we feel we can't always communicate our feelings or the emotions or what we went through, what we didn't go through, in the language of the colonizing language. Like I feel that when you're mentioning that definitely resonates with me, because I feel sometimes I can never express truly how I feel in English, but I can never fully also express myself in my native language, because English is actually my native language because I'm born here, I'm raised here.
But family at home speaks Urdu.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
But it's like dissociation. I feel that also, manifests within our creative outlets and how we explore our creative outlets.
I kind of get what you're saying. I come from a mixed family, so my dad was Jewish, my mum was Christian, and I use a lot of Yiddish, which is like a Jewish version of language, which is really expressive, and I love it, and I often bring it into conversation. And you can see sometimes people they get the standard Yiddish stuff, but sometimes you say something and people look at you as if like, what on earth are you saying? So I get that. Do you see having the dual language as an advantage or a disadvantage?
I see it as an advantage, because I think you were saying like Yoruba, like it's flamboyant. Like you want to be like out there. It gives you that confidence that like maybe English doesn't, because I've noticed like in my family when they speak Urdu, it's a very poetic, very calm, very like you know, like just very calm language, and it's very flow, and you just feel so much at peace. But when it's Punjabi, it's like da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and it gives you that confidence of that flamboyant nature, and you get loud and you're not even shouting, you're just, you know, so flamboyant in your speech. And I've definitely noticed that, and like then you feel excited. And yeah, but I feel for me, because I'm very interested in like the linguistic aspects and just looking at words and communication in different languages, but I've never ever, it's a work in progress, but right now I've never established a language, neither my own ethnic native language, because I feel like my mind as well, and I think this links to creativeness, it kind of like scatters. So I'm like, I find that really interesting and I grab it. I find that really interesting and I grab it. And I feel it's definitely an advantage, because then you can understand other people. But I think to open yourself away from also just your native language and open yourself up to other people's native languages is such an advantage.
Yeah.
Because I'm so interested in language as a concept, that I've been able to communicate with people I would have never even communicated with, and it's not even with the language, I'll still be communicating with them in English, but because I understand the cultural context, and I also understand like how, you know, how much they would understand, or how to express it to them in a way that, you know, it links to them, is such a like mind-blowing experience, and I feel it's definitely always an advantage.
That's amazing. Tell me, are you working on any specific projects at the moment?
So I'm actually kind of in the work in progress.
Okay, tell me about your work in progress.
On like a little project which I'm keen to try and start, but it's still in like the works. But it's kind of like, it's called Music and Me, and I'm going to be working with like a freelancer in London, because that's where I'm kind of like currently located, and it's kind of explore what music, the impact it has on people, and it also links into the language aspect of it, because I've noticed in my life certain music, certain like genres, but also certain languages linked to a certain specific part of my life that I can never remove, but I never want to remove either. Because at certain points, like for example, when this is so embarrassing to admit.
No, tell it, go on, you got to tell it now.
I was in, you know, like my GCSE time, you know, I was kind of a K-pop fan.
Okay.
She knows why it's
Everyone has that phase.
Are you a K-pop fan?
I've listened to it before.
Okay.
I don't think it's embarrassing.
No, it's not embarrassing, no. But it's like, it's just, you know, kind of cringy.
It depends on what kind of fan you were.
Yeah, no, I was never like that.
Okay.
But it opened me up to like the Korean culture, etc.
Okay.
Then I listened to a lot of the music, a lot of the songs. But instead of like me just being like an avid like fan or anything like that, it really opened me up to like understanding, why do they speak like this, you know, what because I noticed that when they speak to adults, they speak in a completely different tone. It's formal Korean, and then when they speak to everyone else, it's informal. And I feel we do kind of have that in English, but not really. I feel like we just fluctuate, and I found that so interesting for me, because then I also linked it back to my own language. In Urdu, there's formal and informal as well, and a lot of it is like very respect, like it's emphasized on the aspect of respect. And then I thought, wow, it's just like it made me look into Asian languages on a general aspect.
Oh, I bet that was interesting.
It was really interesting. And then like I kind of like got my fascination with like Spanish and Italian, and just seeing how people express themselves and how it also embodies like the person. So linking back to the project of the Music and Me, I felt like that I really noticed that. And with rap, for example, like that's an expressive form of communication and also of language, because and
feels. If you think different music makes you feel differently excited or sad or happy, or you want to cry, it's amazing, isn't it?
Like sometimes if you want to cry, you just turn on that one playlist and it all comes out. Do you know what I mean? And I feel it also, music has such a substantial like impact on certain periods of your life. Like people can actually link back a song to such a core period in their life, which they don't even think about it, they don't feel bad. As soon as that song comes on, it all comes rushing back to them.
And remembering words. I mean, I don't remember what I did yesterday.
No, but you can recite
remember the words to a song from 20 years ago. It's weird, isn't it?
It's so interesting. So I'm looking to kind of get that into the works. And
in what way? How do you envisage that happening? And what will it be?
So the person I'll be working with, he's kind of like a videographer, like, you know, and we kind of want to do kind of like questioning people, kind of like either a documentary or more like a sit down, ask questions and see, like, you know, what resonates with people. And I've kind of like been using social media to find certain people whose stories I kind of felt like stood out to me, and I want to ask them, did music play a part in those stories?
Tell me about poetry in terms of how that works for you. How do you first, do you go have a theme? Is it based on an emotion? And then how do you create it? What's your creative process when it comes to writing poetry?
Yeah, I think the way in which I've approached it has actually changed over the past couple of years. I feel as though the more you kind of do that creative thing, the more you get in a sort of relationship to it. I think when I first started writing, it was very much just like rambling, whatever it was in my mind. I just put it on a page. And I think I went through a period of time where I actually went from that sort of free flow into a sort of, I think it was once I kind of started putting my work out there a bit more, I started to feel a lot more nervous about, like, this isn't right, this isn't good, like...
So self-criticism?
Oh, absolutely. And I think, you know, I hold what I do to a very high standard all the time, not just in poetry, just in everything. And I think it was like when I knew that other people would be interested or would be reading it, then I kind of had that lapse of, I need to make this kind of perfect, I need to sit here, I need to sit there, like a lot of moving things around on the page. And I think I had that kind of moment. I even got to the period where I even found it hard to write because I was too nervous to even put anything on the page in the first place, which is a very strange place to be in, because obviously writing was always that thing, that outlet for me, and so not being able to do that, it was a very counterintuitive sort of thing. But I think I've kind of now got to the point where when I write is very much, I just let it come out as it needs to come out. And I think one thing I've come to value so much actually are those early stages where you kind of just have words here and there, and it's sort of like there's a phrase here, there's a nice rhyme here. That's one thing about me, is I love rhythm, I love rhyme, and I love the way it kind of like comes together. Like there's a bit of music,
like there's a bit of dance in here. I think you'll be fine on those dance classes.
Yeah, I love rhythm, but I love punchiness. I love when you speak and it flows and it feels like a song almost. So yeah, now I've come to really like kind of value those stages where it is a bit of a jumble, it is a bit of a mess, and then it's within that kind of like spread is where you can kind of go in and like almost the kind of diamonds come to light, and you can kind of like almost I'll pick this, I'll pick that, I'll pick that. And I think it's all worth being on the page. And I think now I'm more kind of feel through the sense of I'm much more driven by my performance. Like, how do I want this to come across on stage? Where do I want to put that emphasis? Where's that beat land, kind of thing? Yeah, and I think the thing about me as well is obviously it's this is going to sound crazy, but I love to read. But if I'm presented with a whole page of stuff, give it. You know what? Sometimes I just turn off. I think after maybe doing 3 years of just constant reading, maybe that's why I'm just like, you know what? But when something happens when you actually start speaking and you actually start talking and you actually start performing, and when it sounds like music, then something in your mind just clicks to it. So I think that's what I've kind of like started to shift into. How can this help my audience, and like where do I want to leave my audience? How do I want to lift them up, and how do I want to kind of mellow them out? And at what points do I want to do that? So I think that's the way I've started to think about it. And I think my work has become a lot more conversational in tone. Not to say that I still don't like that sort of lyricism, but I think it's become a lot more like, here's me talking to you, but it's just through these words in this time and in this place. And so I think that's the way I kind of have now pivoted at this point in the journey. And I'm enjoying that because it feels a lot more personal. It feels a lot more like we're breaking down the barriers of performer and like audience. It's more like, let's just talk. Let's just listen and let's just talk. And I think it's more like that. And I'm really enjoying that at the moment.
Are you working on anything specific at the moment?
At the moment, I feel as though there are a lot of different ties. I think at the point I'm at right now is I'm kind of coming to light a bit more about those things that actually are important to me and that I want to put into my work, and kind of like, obviously not to box myself in by any means, but in the sense of, you know, when you think of an artist, you think of, oh, that artist normally talks about this, or they like to do this kind of thing, or they do things in this kind of way. I think I'm kind of at that point now where I'm very much approaching my work in the sense of what are the things that matter to me and what are the things that I want to put out into the world. So I think it's more that for me, and I think from there I'm able to kind of like really understand myself a lot more and understand my work a lot more, which is exciting.
You mentioned something earlier that was really interesting about people think creativity, there has to be an end product. But you said something really interesting about it's about often yourself. Can you tell me what you mean by that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was one thing when I was growing up that I felt my writing was very much secluded, in the sense of like, I didn't really think that anyone could be a writer, or anyone could be a poet, or anyone could be a creative as an endeavour in a career. And I think the reason why I thought that was because oftentimes when you think of what creativity is, it's always, okay, so what you do, what have you done? Show me this, show me that. What are the examples? And I think creativity, when you sometimes start to put it into that box of producing stuff and having things to look back on, it can almost be a hindrance or a deterrence, because creativity is all about what you do for yourself. And I think that's where it comes from. First and foremost, it comes from you, and it comes from kind of your community. And I think that because we often put things into a box of like, okay, if you're creative, then you must have this business and you must have this kind of thing, you must have these accolades, these prizes. It can kind of drain all of the root cause of that creativity. I watched this video recently where someone was asking the question of why are there so many DJs all of a sudden everywhere, and there's kind of been like a thing of like everyone's just a DJ now.
Just makes sense.
And it's so fine, like we love DJs, but at the same time it's like the video was talking about how people no longer just participate in music in the sense of listening to it and enjoying it and having a nice time out on a night out maybe. They're now feeling like they have to be participating and contributing to it.
Right.
And that's fine, because obviously more contribution is always a good thing, but we're no longer seeing creativity as something that we can just enjoy, but it's something that we have to actively be seen to be doing.
Do you think in part that's because people want to be famous and known, and the whole pressure around social media?
I think it ties into a little bit, but I think it's also a kind of trend that we're seeing in our society of like, what do you leave behind you? Like, what do you have to your name? And the sense of people always wanting to kind of be identified by the stuff they've done or the things that they have. And I think we didn't have that pressure as much as we do now. I think it's more like the sense of achievement is always, or success is always tied into those things, those tangible material things, and not the kind of sense of self-fulfillment, of kind of like doing things because you enjoy it, or your sense of well-being in life. So I think that's the challenge we're facing, it is in a sense of people are now seeing creativity as like a notch on the belt, rather than just kind of like something that you do for your own fulfillment.
Oh, that's really interesting. Sumaiya, tell me, have you ever found any challenges to your creativity, and how, if you have, how have you managed those and pushed away those barriers?
Yeah, because like Faith mentioned about community, I definitely feel in my own personal journey, I don't really have a community. I feel we ascribe to obviously like our ethnic minority groups or whatever, like our religion, or maybe like if we are part of a group like a dancing group or a singing group, kind of like ascribe ourselves to them. But what we feel or what we gain back from them is not always necessarily, evident. So I never really felt I was really part of my communities per se,
Right.
in all aspects. And I definitely felt secluded from them. And it's not really because of like my living style or anything. It's just kind of I just felt a bit different, or I felt like I was never really welcomed into it like the way other people were.
Why do you think that is?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I'm really not sure. I definitely do feel it does have a lot to do with the communities kind of spacing out a bit more, because I don't know, it's very different from London, I feel, because in like Peterborough is very small communities, and everyone kind of like lived on the same street at one point. When we look in the 90s and 80s, everyone lived on the same street, the same type of community, same area. When we look at Millfield or places like that, and then when the children got older, then they had their children, and kind of spaced out. So it's kind of like now everyone's kind of distant.
Yeah.
And unless you're kind of really active or have like notable family members who are active within that per se community, you're kind of like just
Spread all over
just kind of like
totally.
left out in the wind, you know, kind of find your own way. So you're kind of like trying to put your feet back into a community you never really felt you understood, or you kind of like didn't really connect with at one point.
And have you done that? Have you tried to put your feet, and how does that work for you?
So definitely when I was on my journalism course, like I said, I never really ascribed to any of my communities, whether that was religious, whether that was cultural, whether it was that anything else, like even gender, etc., anything. I didn't really emphasize on any of that. But then when I started to see I can express myself through words, but I can also express myself through other stuff, then I started re-educating myself. And I felt like re-education, or just education itself, can be a pivotal aspect for creativity. I feel creativity definitely comes from inside, but it has to be nurtured with knowledge and education and wisdom. Right. And then that really helped me put my feet down in to put those roots in my understanding of how do I now want to express myself, because I'm learning so much more about me. And I'm like, wow, this is actually fascinating, because I was so alienated from those aspects of myself because I didn't have that community or that nurturing space, to kind of encourage that. And I feel as well another challenge is, like you're saying, unless you produce a product, or I also feel unless you are told you are a creative or ascribe that status, you kind of just left in the wind as well, again, of understanding, is everything that's going on in my head really that fascinating? Is it really that cool? Is it really gonna make people amazed with what I'm thinking about or saying? Because I've definitely noticed I'm not a whiz with media or anything like that, but I definitely, if I watch a movie and I feel it on every level, I can talk for years about it. I can express it in ways that maybe when you watch the movie you're like, but that wasn't even there to me, that wasn't physically notable. I'm like, no, but you have to look at it because it just sparks so much in you. I definitely noticed for me when I was acknowledged, like I said at the very beginning, I feel creativity is to be seen, and that it should first and foremost you see yourself, but sometimes it takes someone else seeing you first to unlock that in you, and then you're like, oh wow, I am this, and I'm able to do this or venture on this path of this amazing world of creativeness, because it's your own how can I say, imagination, your own internal thoughts that are, and your spiritual aspects, which are kind of encouraging this whirlwind of what's going to happen in your future, paving out the pathway for you, and you just have to take those active steps.
And do you think it helps to grow your confidence over a period of time?
Yeah, I don't think confidence comes overnight.
No.
I think that the seed for it can be planted overnight, whether it's through media, you've watched something, or you've read something notable people or how they express themselves, and you're like, wow, I want to be like that. But also it's that thing, you can only venture so far when you want to be like someone, or it's more I want to be encouraged by them and then be myself. Do you know what I mean? You cannot replicate anyone else, but they can be literally pivotal to who you want to, the type of way and lifestyle you do want. But it's removing away you want to be like them. It's you want to be inspired by them.
You might be, for someone, the inspiration too.
Maybe.
Yeah, you probably, I think both
we need
of you
to believe in that, don't
absolutely
we?
You do,
I
absolutely.
think on the back of what you were saying, it really resonates with me, because I feel personally because of the way my family is, in a sense of I guess I'm now second generation. My grandmother came to the UK in the 60s, and the sense of those sort of communities of first generation, second generation immigrants having to build something tangible for themselves in the UK, and kind of having to build a whole new structure of living. And I think that's where sort of the back of having physical achievements does come from. Do you have somewhere to live? Do you have a stable job? Do you have a car? Things like this. And I think it's things that you can kind of look at and say, yeah, I built this, I built that, I built this. And that kind of being a measure of success, and what an amazing feat it is. But at the same time, now that we're a bit more established here, we're now beginning to expand those horizons that they couldn't even have really even thought about, in a sense of how do I make my mark culturally, creatively. And those are things that don't happen, again, like confidence, it doesn't happen overnight. And it's difficult because even though you are growing and kind of like putting your roots down, it's in a different way. It's not as tangible as here's my property, here's my family, here's where I live, here's my space, here's my home. And so I think that it's all those things that we kind of like, or at least I feel as though I'm drawing on, that feeds into my creativity. It's not always completely evident, it's not always completely tangible, but it matters and it's important, and it shows that really all that stuff, all those things that they did before have a legacy and have an impact, because here we are now and able to kind of express ourselves and feel comfortable expressing ourselves in this space.
Amazing.
For sure. And I feel as well like you can't build on shaky ground. So it's like trying to find the level where you're not shaking around and you can plant that seed of like, you know, a new way of life, moving on from, you know, what your basically living ancestors have done. Because I've also realised we kind of, when we think about culture, we kind of look at ancestors in like a previous manner, but there are like living ancestors right now, like our grandparents, they're still alive, or if they are alive, you know, and they are still like manifesting their ways and their thoughts and stuff into the grounds and into our thoughts and everything still now. Then we have ancestors in the future which we are building towards and for. And I feel like having that mindset and to understand like you are also your very self every like step you take, but not to put that pressure on you like, yeah, sure. Oh my god, like, you know, you have to do everything perfectly, or you have to make like a legacy for yourself, because you have to find that ground where you can be stable and you're not shaking around and you're not, you know, doubting yourself on one side and, you know, neglecting yourself on another side. You have to be like, okay, like now I can plant the seed of my, you know, creative pursuits and what I want my world to look like, because you can't change the world, but you can change your world, which can then impact the world at large through your interactions and through, you know, your communication.
And for our generation, maybe part of what allows us to happen is, you know, our parents, they had to put the roots down. They had to, like you say, get the car, get the house, and they had to be almost a bit quiet about who they were and where they came from. But our generation can maybe sing and be a bit louder and prouder and bring the creativity from our families, generations and where they came from and build that in. Yeah,
like I think we were mentioning, before we were recording, we were saying about like our creative like little hobbies and stuff like that, and I was just thinking to myself, I don't do a lot of like little like paintings or delicate stuff or anything like that. I'm out there DIYing, like I'm painting the fence, I'm painting the mirrors, I'm doing all this stuff, and I honestly do think it comes from like your family and your roots and your surroundings a lot. Like a lot of my aunties and a lot of like people in my family, they're very delicate painters, but they never really exercised it or like pursued it. But my immediate, like in my little realm of family, it was very DIY. Like all I've grown up is painting walls, painting fences and stuff. But it's a creative pursuit, and you're creating a space, and like that can also lead into careers, etc., like interior design, etc. And I just think when we look at life with a bit more optimism, it really gets us out of like the barriers that we have. We definitely all have our own individual barriers, but recognizing that and then finding an optimistic way to venture out of that is really important, especially when you want to unlock your creative, you know, pursuits and realms.
Do you know what? It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you both today about your creativity and what it means to you. And I really appreciate you coming and joining us today. Can you tell me both a little bit about how people can get in contact with you, which we will put on at the end so people can? Do you have any social media feeds? Yeah,
I have an Instagram, and that's mostly where I like look at stuff or I contact people on.
Okay.
Should I mention it?
Yeah, do it.
Yeah, okay. It's Mia.Farashah, so MIA.FARASHAH.
Okay.
And it's just very simple, and you just type that in and you give me a follow request, and I might ask first, who is this?
Yeah, absolutely.
And if you just let me know why you're following or, you know, texting me, then I will definitely get back to you and like be open to conversation.
Faith, how can they get in contact with you?
People can contact me on Instagram at Faith Falai, that's FAITH, and Falai, FALAYI. I also have a LinkedIn, Faithful Eye as well.
Okay,
I
tell me
need to
about
get
that.
on that LinkedIn.
LinkedIn is a bit of a stormy place to be in right now.
Is it?
Yeah, having just graduated, everyone's kind of like, oh, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I'm like,
Oh, okay, I've got you.
Yeah, but you know, if anyone wants to approach me on LinkedIn, I'm very open to that as well.
Brilliant.
Yeah, it's the same, Faithful Eye.
Thank you so much, girls.
Thank you
Really
so much for
appreciate
having
your
us.
time.
Thank you. This has been so fun.
It's lovely. Thank you.
So that's it for today's episode, but don't worry, we've got some more great guests lined up. Here's a sneak peek of what's to come in the next episode.
Creativity feels like a gateway into education for a lot of young people who are struggling to access it. So I have a bit of a teaching background as well, and I've worked with young people who are no longer in mainstream education and unfortunately become forgotten, and they are marginalised, and because of their difficulties and some of their life experiences, they struggle to access education in a mainstream setting. And in my experience, creativity has been sometimes for some individuals the only way to be able to engage and learn.
Remember, you can download every episode from season 1 right now from wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to watch instead, you can check out the full episodes on Peterborough Presents YouTube channel. We would love a season 2, so however you tune in, remember to like, comment, subscribe and share. Every bit of engagement helps massively. See you in the next episode.